Turns out when I took the original manuscript to New York, and this was something that had not started out as a book for the general public. In fact, when I first came back from my coma, for one thing, my brain was devastated. And I'll get into that in some detail. I think that's an important feature because people have a way of looking at me up here and saying, well, he can't have been that sick. But the doctors who hear the story, and certainly my doctors to this day, have no idea how I came back. I have no idea how I came back, and yet I can tell you that there's some lessons in there that are beautiful lessons for all of us, because the power is there for all of us to awaken as eternal spiritual beings and come to realize much more what this is all about. And the beautiful gift that brings with it is a tremendous capability for healing in every sense of the word. And I'll be getting into that. Those who've read the book will know I get into a deep discussion there about unconditional love and what it really is all about. And as I said earlier, I grew up in a very scientific home. In fact, my father, who was very influential in my life, he had grown up in eastern Tennessee. His own father was a general surgeon. My father grew up in the Depression. He was a combat surgeon in the Pacific in the Second World War. And I assure you, his very strong faith in an infinitely powerful and loving God got him through the brutality and hardship that he saw in New Guinea and the Philippines and then on up into Japan in the mid-1940s. That faith in God got him through that, and he came back and headed up a neurosurgical training program in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He was a world-renowned neurosurgeon. So he was very much a scientist. Now for him, there was never any conflict. He knew that the science that he studied so hard didn't hold a candle to the power, wisdom, and love of that God at the core of his beliefs and the nature of this world. And so for him, it was always very simple. You know, science was very small, and the human brain and mind very small, and would never remotely come in the ballpark of being able to prove or disprove the existence of that infinitely loving God. Now, I'm pretty much a child of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And like many in this room who are of my generation, I grew up knowing that science is the pathway to truth. Now, I'm more of a scientist now than I've ever been. And I also realize that the science that I worshiped before my coma, and I promise you that that pure materialist science, reductive materialism, that in a nutshell says if you reduce everything down to electrons, protons, quarks, neutrons, photons, subatomic particles, build up the physics, chemistry, biology, the brain, and all of that, you can understand everything there is to understand about the workings of the universe. And the problem with that kind of thinking, the way it stands now, is that that science cannot offer up the first sentence to try and explain to you how the physical brain might give rise to consciousness. About that reductive materialist science that says the brain creates consciousness. It says it's all birth to death and nothing more. It basically also says that we're all automatons. That modern neuroscience will tell you none of us have free will. In fact, they will try and tell you that consciousness itself is a complete illusion. In other words, that it's just those subatomic particles, atoms, molecules in the brain, the cells in the brain, creating this illusion of consciousness, but no, they're just following natural laws. That kind of science is a faith-based religion that actually has almost nothing to support it. And what I mean by that is that spirit, soul, consciousness is the fundamental reality of existence in this universe. And the brain does not create consciousness as much as serve as a reducing valve or filter that allows consciousness in. And as a neurosurgeon who spent more than 15 years at Harvard Medical School and really bought into the conventional model of brain creates consciousness, that's a pretty big admission about changing up my worldview. 5.5 years or so, at which time I had spent more than 20 years in academic neurosurgery, thought I had some idea of how the brain, mind, and consciousness worked. And again, I was totally into that conventional neuroscientific view that is about to disappear from this world because it's inadequate. It's far too simple, and it doesn't explain any of the observations. Now, on the morning of November 10th, 2008, at 4:30, I woke up with severe back pain. This was totally out of the blue. And this, of course, is a lot of the story Proof of Heaven, but I don't want to repeat a lot of that, but there are a few essential parts that I want to bring out. And I remember thinking that if I could make it down the hallway in my home and get into a hot bath, maybe the pain would go away. Well, in fact, I got into a hot bath and almost couldn't get out of the tub. The pain kept getting worse and worse. I was able to pull myself up on a towel and then took little baby steps down the hall back into the bedroom, and I collapsed, writhing in agony, in a cold sweat. Collapsed on the bed and just in abject misery, couldn't figure out what in the world was going on, the pain getting worse and worse by the minute. Soon thereafter, my youngest son, at that time he was 10 years old, his name is Bond. Those who've read the book will realize that Bond is a far more appropriate name for him than I knew at the time. But Bond came in the room and realized Dad's not off at work, and my God, he looks like he's in horrible pain. So he came over and he started rubbing my temples to make me feel better. As soon as he touched my head, I felt like he'd driven a white-hot railroad spike right through my head. Severe pain. And of course, anyone out there with any kind of medical background, if you heard about sudden onset of severe back pain, severe headache, you might think meningitis. Well, the doctor was already out. My brain was being overrun with an extremely rare, aggressive, primitive, and absolutely should have killed me bacterial infection, a meningoencephalitis. And I had no clue what was unfolding. And in the midst of this worsening torture of pain, you might wonder what in the world was going through my mind. Well, I remember Bond was being readied for school downstairs, and I'm lying there in this worsening pain thinking, oh my gosh, if this really gets bad, I might have to go to the emergency room. And if that happens, well, I could imagine all the lines and waiting and the paperwork, and then finally I'd start getting better on my own, and there'd be all the embarrassing goodbyes to my colleagues. And so I remember thinking that it might take so long that I wouldn't even be home by the time he got back from school. So I remember kind of croaking out, "Have a good day at school, Bond." It's the last thing I remember. I was gone from this world for the next 7 days. Don't remember a thing. My family actually thought I was resting, so they closed the door and let that happen. And about 2 hours later, when they came in to check on me, I was having a grand mal epileptic seizure. So yes, they called 911, and the EMTs came to our home, and they came in, started some IVs, put in medications trying to break the seizures, and couldn't do it. So they hauled me off to the Lynchburg General Hospital emergency room. Of course, I remember none of this. I remember absolutely zero of the next 7 days from this earthly realm. They put me on 3 very powerful intravenous antibiotics, put me on a ventilator, up on the medical intensive care unit. On the second day, they found out that it was E. coli. Now, if you do a medical literature search on spontaneous E. coli meningitis in adults, somewhere around 1 in 10 million or less per year. It's extremely rare. Spontaneous E. coli meningitis does occur in newborns, but it's very rare beyond the age of 3 months. You can imagine how I have to defend my level of maturity, but that's just something I have to live with. And it turns out that through that week, the doctors had seen the last evidence of the human part of my brain, the neocortex, the outer surface of the brain. That's the part that's very specifically attacked by anytime you get a meningoencephalitis. And in fact, it's really that diagnosis that's the big gift here. And it's the reason the medical community and scientific community has taken my story so seriously. And you'll hear how the logic of that unfolds. I am often asked to give talks to medical groups, nursing schools, med schools, surgical groups, etc., because they get where this is all really going. Things were starting to turn around finally. My white blood cell count was coming down a little bit, but the problem was I had no neurologic function left at that time. They were at a point of doing brain death criteria. That was the next step. And it had only gotten worse during the week, so in fact they held a conference that Sunday morning, day 7 of coma. They had a conference with my family where they said, well, you know, he started this week with a 10% chance of survival. Now we're down to a 2% chance of survival. And if he's in that lucky 2%, best case scenario, that he'll spend a month or two in this hospital, then be transferred to a nursing home in a persistent vegetative state and die in coma a few months later. So the recommendation was, why don't we stop the antibiotics? And that was indeed what they did. Now, it turns out it was a few hours after that that I started coming back to this world. And my doctors were right. I was extremely ill from this and should not have survived at all, and should not have had any experience at all, much less any memories of experience. And that's one of the reasons why my story has captivated the scientific and medical worlds by storm. My brain was wrecked. No words, no language, no recognition of any of those beings around the hospital bed. My mother, sisters, sons. Absolutely no clue what this universe was. But I knew where I'd been. I remembered completely, full well, the journey I was returning from, even though I remembered absolutely nothing during any part of it of Eben Alexander's life before coma. No words, no language, none of the religious concepts, certainly none of the knowledge of all those years spent in neurosurgery studying brain, mind, and consciousness. Every bit of that was completely deleted for this entire experience, which makes it a little bit atypical when you look at other near-death experiences. But I was amnesic for the life of Eben Alexander, and it took me many months to even begin to glimpse how and why that might have been the case. My default understanding early on was that, well, of course, I had this severe bacterial meningitis that destroyed the neocortex, the human part of my brain. So it made perfect sense that I didn't have any memories or knowing of my life before coma. Turns out the reasons for it go quite a bit deeper than that. But that was my working model for a long time, that such a severe neocortical destruction would erase all the memories. But it turns out that that set the stage for a very powerful journey with tremendous lessons in it. Was this slowly spinning white light that came towards me, a very clear and pure light that had fine white and gold tendrils off of it. And this white light came towards me, and the best part about it is it came packaged with a perfect musical melody. And yet, as this pure white light came towards me, it was coming with this perfect musical melody, absolutely beautiful. And as you will hear, sound, music, vibration, frequency is the way that our souls transcend in these levels. It's one of the reasons why sound, hymns, chants have been used for thousands of years to help engender deep transcendental conscious states in any kind of spiritual broadening of consciousness, religious ceremony, etc. And that sound is absolutely essential to the work I do now. Up above, in the velvety black skies above, were pure spiritual beings, orbs of golden light, swooping and swirling in formation, leaving sparkling golden trails, emanating these hymns, chants, anthems, powerful like a tsunami wave, crescendo after crescendo after crescendo of the most beautiful music, waves washing through me. And that's what was fueling this incredible joy and mirth going on in this Gateway Valley, as I came to call it. Now, the important thing to understand is that that Gateway Valley was much more real than this world. far sharper, crisper, and more real than this. This is very dreamlike by comparison. See with the eyes, you don't hear with the ears, you become others to feel the emotional power of existence. In fact, often if you get into the near-death experience literature, you read a lot about the tens of thousands of life reviews that people describe. You know that old saying, your life flashes before your eyes? Well, it's very true, and that's what near-death experiencers tell you, is that you go through every bit of your life, all the crucial parts that are there to teach you about the lessons of good and bad, that are still residual lessons for you to learn, to help you and your higher soul, and your soulmates, your soul group. And the judgment is not by any higher power, it's by our higher soul. That's what's doing the judging in that realm. And that's when we go through those life reviews, it's not some vague sepia-tinted memory. These are sharp, clear, crisp, absolute reliving the events more powerfully than when we live through them in the earthly realm. And we have to feel the power of our decisions, the emotional impact on our fellow beings. So if we lived a life handing out pain and suffering to others, we have to feel that in that life review. But we have to feel it far more sharply than they felt it here in the material realm, which is a pale, dim reflection of that far more real and crisp world of that gateway realm, of the realm between lives, where we reunite with our higher souls, and where we reunite with our soulmates. And in the glaring, beautiful, all-loving light of that infinitely powerful God, that is the setting in which we relive those events and then plan our next incarnations for coming back in. But it is a very crisp ultra-reality. This is all about those lessons that we're here to learn. And the coin of that realm is love. That unconditional love that goes far beyond the phrase, far beyond those words. And of course, so many who have had near-death experiences and shared death experiences and other similarly spiritually transformative experiences know exactly what that's all about, that unconditional love. And the reason it's so important for all of us to get is because we're here in Soul School to learn those lessons of that love. And what we find is that that unconditional love has infinite power to heal. And I came from my journey to see that the hardships and difficulties in this life, and I promise you as a neurosurgeon, as a doctor, that very much includes illness and injury. They are gifts. They are opportunity for growth of our souls. We are all here as members of soul groups to do this growing. And when I talk about soulmates, I'm not just talking about that love of your life. I also came to see that often those who I'd seen before my coma as my nemesis, as someone who was in my way, preventing me from getting something I wanted in this life, often is a very near and dear soulmate. Very important to understand is that time flow in that gateway realm is very different from time flow here. That's one of the reasons why those life reviews, the memories are not just vague memories, but very strong, powerful learning opportunities where the goods and bads of our life and what we've done to others, feeling the impact of our decisions on others, is so hyper-real. And we go through it, like they say, flashes before your eyes. And the amazing thing is it doesn't take anything of earth time. It could happen in a second, or it could take a century to unfold. It doesn't matter. Because time flow and causality in that realm is a much higher order than in this realm. And that's why often when I talk about reincarnation, some people get a little worried and say, well, wait a minute, what if the love of my life gets tired of waiting for me and they reincarnate before I get there? I promise you that doesn't happen. Because this is really all about love, and it's all about the relationships that we have. This is all about learning in Soul School and growing as we do. And there's nothing more complex than knowing that it's simply by following a pathway that is one of manifesting that love as best we can. Love is the coin of that realm. And the more we can serve as conduits of that love, because our very consciousness is a direct, absolute connection to the divine, infinite healing power of that all-loving source. And by serving as conduits for that, and allowing the love to come through us to our fellow beings, to show compassion, forgiveness, mercy, acceptance. That's all that matters. And that's what these lessons are all about. And that's how our souls ascend, is by getting closer and closer to that perfection of that love and ascending towards that oneness with the divine. The central message of Proof of Heaven: you are deeply loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. You will be taken care of. Is when you know and fully know that you are a divine, eternal, spiritual being directly connected to that all-powerful creative deity. You have nothing to fear. And that is all you need to know. When you believe that and know that, it enables you to bring that lightness and love into this world in the face of darkness and evil as we perceive it here, and to do so in those spiritual realms and ascend higher and higher towards that oneness with the divine. Yet more to come, and that had to do with those angelic choirs above. I've told you, music, sound, vibration, frequency, that's what allows our souls to ascend and transcend to higher and higher levels in those spiritual realms. And what I remember is all of that collapsing down. The material world, this four-dimensional space-time collapsing down. That deeper time of causality in that gateway, that beautiful galley, the Gateway Valley, where we often are between lives, collapsing down, that higher causality, all of that collapsing down, until I finally emerged into this realm that I call the core. Infinite inky blackness, filled to overflowing with infinite unconditional love of that Creator, all through eternity and infinity and higher dimensional space. And in that beautiful, all-powerful, infinite love, there was also this brilliant orb of light, brighter than 1,000,000 stars, that I remember being there, and I thought that it was somehow serving as an interpreter or translator. A very strong sense of the three of us being there, of that infinite, all-loving, creative power, far beyond any naming, far beyond any description. And yes, that deity has no gender. Oprah asked that question, just in case that one's out there. No, that deity has no gender, is completely beyond any words or description. And that's why I think that orb of light was there. Now, all of what I'd seen collapsing down, higher dimensional space-time, those spiritual realms, every bit of that was like this very complex oversphere that was there as part of the lessons. And when I entered that core realm, I was told, now not in words, this is pure conceptual flow, you're not here to stay. We'll teach you many things. You'll be going back. And I hope you understand by now that when I say the three of us, you know, this infinite, all-powerful creative source and that orb of light and my conscious awareness, this was consciousness far beyond the limited consciousness of Eben Alexander. This was the consciousness we all share, far deeper, far more profound, a direct link to divine, which is in each and every one of us forever. And I'd like to close by just reminding you of that beautiful message that she gave me that really is a message for each and every one of us, because we are one soul. We are one consciousness. This is all about all of us and all of this world. And it's time to get together and overcome those false boundaries of separation. You are deeply loved and cherished forever. You will be taken care of. You have nothing to fear. Thank you very much.